there's quite a few people out there that will say, living with your parents or even your grandparents shows immaturity and your unwillingness to move on with your life and get married, have kids, and that it's just overall a bad thing to do because it's a bad thing to not be able to, be your own person and get ready for the next stages of your life. I have a different way of looking at it because I'd say for the most part, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it also can't be a good thing, and it's where it gets a little complicated. And I guess to really dive in and start this off, you have to ask yourself the one question. If you're someone who's struggling with this idea of, living with my parents or grandparents is a bad thing, you have to ask yourself this one question if you're struggling with that. Are you on good terms with them? Do you feel like your parents, actually love you, they care about you, and they're fine with you staying with them for a bit until you can, get yourself ready for the next stage in your life, or just in general for the time being. And the best way I can sum it up if you're struggling to piece together if it's actually the case, just remember the good times you had with your parents or grandparents, and then think about the bad times. Do the pros outweigh the cons? Was the good overshadowing the bad? Or if it was mostly bad times, was the bad because of the parents themselves? Or was the bad times because of just life circumstances, but they still, made up for it in their own way? You kind of have to ask yourself that question. And if you are the child of divorce, and it's, one parent or the other, that's where it gets even more complicated. Because, which parents is okay with it, which isn't. There's a lot of questions you have to ask. It's why I said it's complicated, because even if you have a good relationship with them, it can be a little hard to figure out if it's all good for you to stay with them or if it's, there's some cons to the whole thing. Because, does your parents maybe still, or grandparents even, because I don't want to forget about grandparents, do they baby you? Do they coddle you? Do they not let you do things? Again, questions that you probably have to ask as well, just to give some ideas of questions. But a lot of, people in Gen Z, people like me these days, are staying with their parents. And there's a lot of reasons. It's mostly economic reasons, really. Let's be honest here. It's economic reasons as to why people are staying with their parents, having to pay just a little bit of rent, how much they draw from power and food, and that's it, which is, again, it's not a bad thing. And I am someone who has lived with their grandparents, speaking from my experience, for a bit, and I'll explain. See, when I got out of high school, I immediately left my mother's house because I'm a child of divorce, and I just did not want to be in that house anymore. I wanted to get on with my life on some level, but I had to wait for college to start. So I stayed with my grandparents, from May of 2018 to, August of 2018. And, when COVID happened, back in 2020, I went back and stayed with them until I could go back to school, which was from mid-March to, again, August of that year. And then, during this time while being in college, I'd go back to my grandparents' house, stay with them, then go back to college, vice versa, still see family as much as I could. But around now 2 years ago, coming up this July, I stayed with my grandparents for about 10 months because life in Colorado wasn't getting as good as I was hoping. Financially, it was a struggle, and I just decided it was time to pack it up and leave. There wasn't really much left in Colorado, which that's a story for another time. And I stayed with them for 10 months while it was really sort of a help my grandmother clean out the storage units, but it was also a kind of time for me to decompress, because I had prayed about having a 6-month hiatus because a friend of my mother's, basically, I know I'm going a little off topic here, but there's a point here. A friend of my mother said that, most people that go to college, they should probably wait 6 months before wanting to go to college, or even a year, just to see if that's really what they want to do, and then start it. So, in a way, I wish I had that, because as she was saying it, I wish I had taken that 6 month, just staying with, for my example, my grandparents, really. Well, that prayer was finally answered. It was just 10 months. But still, regardless, I am very much glad that I did. Because at the end of the day, your parents and grandparents, They're not going to be around forever. You should spend time with them. Again, if you have a positive relationship with them, you should spend time with them. There's no rush to get to the finish line in life. You know, I know once, you turn 18, you're getting ready for college, or you're getting ready for that next chapter of your life, you could take some time for yourself. Enjoy the summer, or just, again, take my mother's friend's advice of taking 6 months to a year just to think about what you want to do. Now, obviously, everybody's situation is different and unique, but again, if you have the parents or grandparents, or even, let's expand this to family members in general, including uncles, aunts, all that kind of thing. If you have that opportunity, don't be scared to not jump on that. Because, again, a lot can happen in that time period, and, you could have spent a good chunk of high school wanting to go to college, but then as you spend those, 6 months, for example, or even a couple months, you realize you don't really want to go to college. Maybe you want to do something else in life. So, use that time to spend more time with them. Maybe now that you're not tied down to really much of anything, go on vacations if you can afford to. Go on vacations with your parents or grandparents or family members. Enjoy that time you couldn't spend because, you were doing school, you were in a sport, or you were working, or blah, 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 that kind of thing. Now, obviously, if your parents or if you're living with your grandparents, if it's toxic, it's just bad all around, get out of Dodge. Get out of there. Don't even, hesitate. Don't look back. Maybe find a friend to stay with. Don't stay there if it's toxic. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just get out of there if that's a bad situation all around. I'm just saying if you have the opportunity, you have the parents and grandparents or family members in general that care about you, stay with them. Do those things I mentioned earlier. Because, you won't know how long they are going to be around. Anything can happen in life. So don't take that for granted. A lot of people do, and they don't realize it until it's gone. You don't really miss something until you realize it's gone. Or however that saying goes these days. And the last thing I'll say is, don't let anyone tell you, again, if the pros outweigh the cons, that staying with your parents or grandparents is bad. It's not. As long as it isn't toxic, you're not getting beaten, you're not being scolded, you're not being talked down, vice versa. You feel comfortable, safe, just do it. Just stay with your parents for a bit. There's no rush. Just do it. Figure out your next chapter in life, because sometimes in life, it is nice to spend some time to think about things and what you want to do. I mean, those 10 months I spent with my grandparents, I really do appreciate it, because then I was able to figure out what I wanted to do next and continue on my chapter in life, and now I'm here, where I am now. Back to living alone and just making money and surviving, the best I can, or the best that any of us really can. So that's all I have to really say. Like I said, don't let anyone tell you that it's a bad thing. It ain't. It's a good thing for those reasons I listed earlier. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say in this video. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell to when I go live, or rather post my videos, because we are still on the road to hit 300 subscribers. And as of recording, I'm at 178 subscribers. So we're going to keep going. The goal is by the end of next month to hit that 300. And then we'll go from there. But we're growing. We are growing. And I'm very grateful and happy for everyone subscribing, because we're, not only we're going to reach that goal, but I'm closer and closer to my personal goals that I have set for myself, but also just glad I'm starting to make a community on YouTube. I'm just happy that everyone's, subscribing and commenting, lets me know that you guys are engaged and are happy with the videos I'm posting. It doesn't have to hit thousands upon thousands of views. It could just be a couple comments, and it could be just a couple hundred views, as long as, there's people interested in what I have to say and people are happy about the topics I'm talking about. That's all that matters to me. So anyway, but as always, the footage you're seeing in the background is a hint on what's happening this Saturday, because we got another My Experience video coming out. So anyway, got lots to talk about this Call of Duty. So anyway, I'll see you guys Saturday with another video.